Kit Carson, Part 17. The services of the troops were not required, for the Indians knew they would come, and before their arrival they had removed beyond striking distance. The troops met me about 25 miles from Bent's Fort, and I returned with them to Rayado. I delivered the wagons and goods to Mr. Maxwell and remained here until March 1852. Mr. Maxwell and I now rigged up a party of 18 men to go trapping, I taking charge of them. We went to the Valle Salado and down the South Fork to the plains, through the plains of Laramie River to the new park, trapped it to the old park, trapped it again, then again to the Valle Salado, then on to the Arkansas, where it comes out of the mountain. We then followed it on under the mountain, thence home to the Rayado, through the Raton Mountains, having made a very good hunt. I remained at Rayado during the fall and winter. In February 1853, I went to the Rio Abajo Valley and purchased a flock of 6,500 sheep. I returned with them to Rayado, and then I started for California with them. Henry Mercure and John Bernavet and their employees accompanied me. We first went to Laramie, and then kept to the wagon road that is traveled by immigrants to California. We arrived about the 1st of August, having met with no serious loss. We did very well with our sheep, selling them to Mr. Norris at about $5.50 a head. Hearing so much of the great change that had taken place at San Francisco, I concluded to go there. When I arrived, I would not have known the place if I had not been there so often before. Maxwell came on to California shortly afterwards and disposed of his sheep in Sacramento. From Carson River, he sent an express on to me, which I received at Sacramento, requesting me to await his arrival so that we could travel home together by way of the Gila. When he arrived, I went down to Los Angeles by land while he took the steamer. I would not travel by sea, having made a voyage in 1846 with which I was so disgusted that I swore it would be the last time I'd ever lose sight of land while I could get a mule to carry me. Maxwell reached Los Angeles about 15 days ahead of me. We made the necessary preparations for our journey and then set out for New Mexico. We soon arrived at the village of the Pima Indians. From here, on account of the scarcity of grass, we continued up the Gila to the mouth of the San Pedro. We ascended this stream for 3 days and then took a straight course for the copper mines. From here, we went on to the River del Norte and thence home through the settlements of the Rio Abajo, and arriving at Taos on December 25th, 1853. On my way home, I saw the Mormon delegate to Congress and was informed by him that I had received the appointment of Indian agent, and on my arrival at Taos, I accepted it and gave the necessary bond. In February 1854, the Jicarilla Apache showed a hostile disposition. Lieutenant Beale of the 2nd Dragoons had a fight with them on the waters of the Red River, in which 1 or 2 soldiers were killed, and several were wounded, but he killed a number of the Indians and forced them to retreat. He charged them once or twice, and although they were superior in numbers, they could not maintain their ground. In March, I proceeded to Santa Fe on business pertaining to my office. Shortly before my departure, a large party of Jicarilla Apaches came within 20 miles of Taos. I saw a number of the chiefs, and they all pretended friendship, but during my absence, they became hostile. Lieutenant J.W. Davidson of the 1st Dragoons and 60 Dragoons of Companies F and I were ordered out against them and overtook them in the Embudo Mountains, about 20 miles southwest of Taos. Judging from the preparations they'd made and from their having chosen such an advantageous position, the Indians evidently intended to fight the troops sent against them unless they should come in force. Lieutenant Davidson had 60 men, and there were 75 or 80 lodges of Indians. When he advanced upon them, they immediately perceived his numbers and came to the conclusion to fight. For when a few men were sent in advance, they did not speak to them in a friendly manner, but instead made hostile demonstrations, and Lieutenant Davidson was compelled to attack. I know him well, having been in engagements where he played a prominent part, and I know him to be as brave as an officer can be. I have been told by the men who were in the engagement that day that he never once took ambush during the fight, and that when he was forced to retreat, he directed his men to take shelter as best they could, while he, fearless of danger, remained exposed to the fire of the Indians. The Indians were in position on the side and top of the mountain, and the troops occupied the bank of a small stream below. The Indians could not be reached on horseback, and the dragoons had to fight on foot, leaving a few men to guard their horses. They ascended the mountain and drove the Indians from their position, but lost 5 men in doing so. The Indians were in great force and had the troops surrounded. They made an attempt to secure the horses, but through the timely arrival of Lieutenant Davidson, they failed. They kept up a fire on the troops from every direction. Meanwhile, they could not be seen by the soldiers as they were concealed behind trees and in the brush. The troops charged them several times, but the Indians whom they dislodged merely retreated and joined those in the rear. Finding that it was impossible to do any execution on account of the situation in which he was placed, and having lost several men and killed and wounded, Lieutenant Davidson was finally compelled reluctantly to retreat. The officer who was with him, seeing the deplorable condition of his men, persuaded him to give up the idea of maintaining his position. The retreat was sounded, and the Indians, in great numbers, pursued the troops, who had to wheel about several times and charge them. They finally succeeded in reaching the main road to Taos, but with a loss of 22 soldiers killed and nearly every one of the command wounded. The number of Indians who fell has never been ascertained, but there is no doubt that many of them were slain. I returned to Taos the day after the fight, passing close to the battlefield, but I did not meet a single Indian. They had all fled across the Del Norte. End of part 17.